All right, Chelsea fans, welcome back to another episode. That's right, of the London is Blue podcast. Hopefully your favorite Chelsea podcast out there and a part of the Men in Blazers media network. Dan, one of your hosts here. And look, it is a match preview podcast with our good friend Sam CFC Central, which means the men's international break is over. The last one for the 2024 calendar year as Enzo Maresca reassembles his squad to take on the club he most previously managed in Leicester City, who have not had as good a season without him at the helm and in their return to the Premier League. So, Sam, as you reflect upon this international break and look forward to the start of the festive fixture run-in that Chelsea are about to embark on, how are you feeling in this exact moment?
Yeah, it's been a welcome break, I think, for all of us. We've been relentlessly generating as much content as we can. But yeah, I actually spent a lot of it watching our games back and studying the tape. So it's been quite an eventful, couple of weeks for me as well. Was watching a little bit of Heidenheim because again, games come so thick and fast that I'm barely going to have time to watch videos then. So just doing a little bit of work in advance, and it's been good to meditate on our work so far because you can get sort of lost in the moment when it's all happening a little too quickly. But yeah, a lot of good things, a little bit of sort of rust that we need to clear out, but overall a good experience and raring to get back into it.
Yeah, it definitely is that time of year where you can feel like you drop attention for half a day and Chelsea have played, two or three fixtures, and that is not going to slow down in any way, shape, or form as we take a look into the weeks ahead, because not only is it a Leicester match, and we've got the Conference League fixtures as well. I mean, thankfully, Chelsea, look, the first two matches return are both away fixtures. We do get that match against Villa in the beginning of December at home, but it is going to be a month, at least for the next few. It's only one home game out of the next six that we have here. So interesting times for this club. We have had a little bit of a better record on the road at times. So this could be a really great rebound moment for us. But we're going to get all into this Leicester team. How are they performing right now? What do we need to consider about them? Are there new strengths or things that we need to consider about them? Are there potentially weaknesses that we'll be able to exploit? And, maybe some of the considerations. Sam loves to throw a couple curveball questions to me about what Maresca might do in the moment. So that will be the fun part of the pod near the end. But before we get into all that, as always, our admin at the top, we just get the housekeeping out of the way. First and foremost, it's always a big thank you in all caps, impact font, size 72, for the support that you, the listener, provide to us for the podcast. You can do that through 5-star reviews with Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Those are always appreciated. You can subscribe on YouTube as well. You can like and comment on the videos, and you hit the bell icon to get notified when we drop something new. Less than half of the people have the bell icon turned on or are subscribed. So if you're listening right now or you're watching this on YouTube and you have not subscribed, just do that right now. Be really appreciated thing. You also sign up for our free weekly newsletter, the London is Blue Dispatch, that Sam puts together so eloquently in the way that he establishes it. You got to check that out. It is free, costs you nothing, and it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to receive on a weekly basis. And you can join our Discord community for your paid capacity as well. But look, that's the admin out of the way. So quick, so sweet, so swift. We move into the conversation around Leicester City, who, you know what? Not exactly the dream return to the Premier League that they would have been hoping for. And, when you are in 15th place in the Premier League on 10 total points with a -7 goal difference, you can only start to look at, well, at least we're not X team. At least we are not Southampton. At least we are not Wolves. At least we are not Crystal Palace. But maybe, Sam, just to set the stage, very transformational team this year. Maybe not something they were expecting, given Enzo Maresca's the approach that Chelsea made for him and how quickly and swiftly they did decide to move on him when he came down as one of the finalists that Chelsea were investigating for and ultimately secured as their head coach. It feels as if this has just been a really interesting and almost unfortunate return for Leicester. Maybe only only saved by the fact that there are a couple teams performing worse than them.
Yeah, it's been quite a puzzling time for them, Dan. Again, last season in the championship, it's been a bit of a cakewalk where the quality differential was a little too high, and Maresca obviously used that to his benefit, where they had the best paid squad, they also had the highest sort of transfer fees accumulated for their players, so spoiled for choice, and it's just been a transitional summer, like you said. Like they've lost their manager, the new ones come in, and there seem to be a lot of strong opinions in terms of which players he wants to use and which one he feels sort of don't fit. And unfortunately, there's been sort of like an Venn diagram kind of thing where there's overlap over the players that were key last season and the ones that are not playing now. So maybe they're missing a little bit of consistency, and with an FFP charge also over their heads, which was, they were sort of like spooked into believing that there might be a points deduction. They just couldn't strengthen over the summer. So they've been very frugal with their signing. So it just feels like, all the little things that could go wrong have just gone wrong. And yeah, the best thing that they can do and sort of look at themselves and say, okay, it could be worse. But it's a good time to be facing them, to be honest. I do feel like there are some grating issues all over the side. And this is the kind of team that you want to put to the sword and sort of build momentum going into a very hectic run of fixtures.
And if you were just looking at the results, I actually think the result score lines as we get in deeper paint a really great picture of just how back and forth this team has been within their overall performances. I mean, they got beat by Manchester United twice, 5-2 in the League Cup and then 3-0 in the league. They had the result against Arsenal. I mean, they did score 2 goals against Arsenal, but that was a 4-2 win for the Gunners. You had the 2-2 draw against Crystal Palace, both these teams kind of punching in a similar area. They were able to score against Aston Villa, one of the better teams in the Premier League this year, but lost ultimately 2-1. They drew against Tottenham, 1-1 in the very, very early part of the season here. And so, like, the results are just all over the place. I mean, against what you would say are better teams, they actually have been able to sometimes kind of keep in line. And it seems like they are definitely willing to go down a level. Like, they very much match the competition that they are playing against. And, in other times, like the United games, just don't show up at all. It really feels like a team that has zero consistency to speak of, and maybe very little to no identity.
Yeah, I mean, we will talk about this later on in the section where we discuss their playing style, Dan, but that's what struck me. Like, it's the identities again. I think there is an identity crisis. Let's just keep it that way between what they learned and inherited from Maresca versus what they've been asked to do. So it does look like there's some friction there in terms of what is best for the team and the players versus what they want to execute on the pitch, what they're asked to do. But like you said, the results just haven't been there. I do genuinely believe like that Arsenal game could have been a turning point. They were playing superbly, and there was a lot of like one of those performances where you're just throwing bodies on the line and making all kinds of, interceptions and blocks. And Mads Hermansen, I think, set a new Premier League record, making 13 saves in one game, and which is quite terrific to watch. And some of them were absolute bangers, but conceding again in stoppage time twice, and hearts were just broken, and that deflated them. That's the kind of defeat that the rug is pulled from under your foot, and you just land headfirst. So it just, I think, a missed opportunity for the manager to get some respite, for the players to show that they belong at this level. But you know, I'm going to sort of have a little bit of Schadenfreude here and say it's good for us, to sort of like pounce on those wounds and make sure that it hurts a little bit more.
And they do have, and again, this is continuing the trend of the opposition we're playing against having a longer list of injuries or confirmed outs or doubtful players relative to our listing. I mean, just before we started recording this episode, the news that Reece James is potentially out again for an indeterminate period of time due to injury dropped. And so that is something to kind of keep in mind here for us. But I mean, we have some doubtfuls maybe in according to the list we pulled here: Fofana, Gusto, Lavia, Sancho. I think all of them are just, maybe day to day. So they could be in consideration for this match, but time will tell as we get closer to kickoff time on in this weekend. But the list is very large comparatively for confirmed outs and unavailable players when it comes to Leicester City.
Yeah, like I mentioned, Dan, there were a couple of, big red flags, and you can see right here that obviously there are some key names missing. Puzzlingly, when I look at Steve Cooper, he has sort of not used a couple of fixtures from last year's side, so I don't really know if they would have been as big a miss as they are on paper. But you can see the five yellows. Facundo Buonanotte is a huge miss for them. He's been playing either at right wing or at the number 10 position, depending on the system that they play. And unfortunately, just after the press conference, it was announced that Abdul Fattahu Isahaku, who's one of their key wingers, again, hasn't been playing under Cooper, or starting under Cooper, I should say, a lot. But he's out for the season with an ACL injury. So we wish him the best and hopefully he'll get well soon. And Jordan Ayew also picked up an injury while on international duty with Ghana. So there's essentially the first choice, second choice, right winger, and first choice, number 10 out. So they do have Bilal Al Khanous, who will probably slot in at number 10, but I really don't know who's going to be at right wing because they've lost number one and number two. So that'll be interesting to see, and that significantly weakens them on the right hand side. But yeah, I think that's the dynamic I'm looking at. Bobby De Cordova-Reid is also the third choice right winger, and he's listed as doubtful. So they might have to sort of, put a stopgap there. I don't know if it'll be Ndidi or somebody, but they'll have to figure out this one. And it's a crisis, a little bit of crisis in attack there.
Well, it will also be good to have Enzo Maresca, who knows some of these players very well from his time managing them, to potentially figure out how to exploit the second, third, or fourth choice option in some of these positions, given their injury situation. But look, we're going to get our first ad break out of the way. And when we come back, it's all about the style of play for, that's right, Steve Cooper's Leicester City. So stay tuned and we will be right back. Okay, so Sam, that's maybe they feel that we stole Enzo Maresca. Chelsea view might be, but we rescued Enzo Maresca from the mess that this Leicester City team and squad is at the moment. But how has that changed the shape of this team? How are they playing now? And where are the similarities and differences season over season?
I watched a lot of Leicester last season, about
Yeah,
15
because you you
games,
did, you had
so
to
almost
preview
like,
you had to preview Maresca for the pod that we did about him
uh-huh.
coming in. So you've done so much homework on this Leicester team. They
I
might be
have,
the second
I have.
team that you are most intimately familiar with now.
It's the team that I watched in the championship like the most in all of my footballing career. So that was the first. But yeah, I've done my homework on Leicester. And I think when you look at what Steve Cooper wanted to do, obviously he's kept the formation, at least the system, the same. So it's either a 4-2-3-1 predominantly and the occasional 4-3-3. But he's also done away with the tweaks that Maresca was doing in the championship. So there's not a lot of inverting from the fullbacks. He's using conventional fullbacks in Justin and Christiansen on the left hand side, but it's also losing key players. So they lost Keenan Dewsbury again, somebody who we stole from them, but he was their record GA contributor last season, and he was absolutely exceptional, runner up to the championship player of the year. But they've lost him, and Cooper again seems pretty reluctant to use, like I mentioned, the mainstays. So Ricardo Pereira, for example, hasn't played much. I think he's also injured for this one. Yannick Vestergaard was somebody who paired up with Wout Faes almost like every single game of the championship. He's just been out in the cold. Apparently, allegedly, I've heard that him and Cooper had a bust up in terms of the tactical approach the side should be taking, and he's just been frozen out. So that tells you about what's happening behind the scenes. Hamza Chaudhry, again, somebody who's been at Leicester for a long time, hasn't played a lot. And like we mentioned, Fatawu wasn't playing, but he also misses out and is a very, very good attacker. So a lot of changes haven't been able to strengthen in certain positions. So that's, I think, affecting them in terms of like what they need to do and where they need to go with what's at their disposal. And I think Cooper struggled a little bit of that. But if I were to look at just general specifics in terms of what they're doing. Then in defense, it's like I mentioned, conventional fullbacks in James Justin and Christiansen, both quite decent. Justin actually scored 2 goals, I think, against Arsenal, so quite good going forward. Can be pretty okay defensively, but Christiansen is also solid, but more of a defensive fullback than one that likes to go ahead. In centre back, they have a little bit of an issue. Not little, little would be understating it, but yeah, Valdes is the only regular, I would say, and he's rotating with 2 other guys at centre back. So Vestergaard, I think, has played 4 games, and Caleb Okoli is somebody who's also stepped in, and both have been, let's just say, bad. So the centre back pairing in general, like the core of their defensive setup just seems all over the place individually and as a unit. There's no dynamics whatsoever. So that's something to keep in mind. Goalkeeper, like I said, Mats Hermansen, we were linked with him in the summer as Robert Sanchez's successor and heir, and had a very good game with Arsenal. His numbers look very good, possibly because of that one game. But he's very good with the ball at his feet, and he will look to find some quick passes between lines, or he'll go direct like he used to in the championship. So when you've got somebody like a Jamie Vardy up front, that sort of tactic helps when you're playing a side that likes to push its defenders up. In midfield, again, one other change that has been made from the Maresca era is Wilfred Ndidi is no longer playing number 10. He did play one game as number 10, which was against Arsenal, but largely he's been um, back to his pivot position along with Harry Winks, or, again, a couple of changes in the pivot position, but he's playing deeper now. And arguably in his favored role, where he's able to be a box to box presence, he can do a little bit of everything. And the number 10 is again taken over. Keenan Dewsbury Hall played it. Now it's been taken over by Vidal El Canus and also Facundo Bonanote. So those 2 guys offer what I would say is their key between the lines presence. So in transition, the guy who will pick the pocket, wait for, those that first ball to come out of pressure, and then run at the defense and make those key decisions in the attacking third. So um, Bonanote in that regard is a big, big miss. He's a very good carrier, also a pretty good attacking threat. Bilal El-Khanous is somebody I've watched extensively before he came to the Premier League. Also very talented, but still extremely young, still getting used to the Premier League. But yeah, very, very talented kid. So he's definitely one to watch. And up front, Jamie Vardy remains, as potent, as evergreen as ever. He scored 18 in the championship last season. And I mean, I wouldn't even say getting into the twilight of his career, but he's still looking very, very good. And we know about Vardy, absolutely brilliant movement, loves speeding off the shoulder and getting in behind. And we've got a defense that will offer him those opportunities to sort of like rush in behind and make it count. But yeah, 38-year-old Wadi, almost 38-year-old Wadi isn't as quick as he used to be. So they will rely on him for goals. But I think for Fana and Colville, this will be a slightly lesser challenge compared to the Wadi of, I would say, 5, 6 years ago, but still very dangerous and one to keep an eye on. So that's, generally it, Dan. It's just, it'll be interesting to see what formation they throw up. Maybe it'll be a 4-3-3. That's what Cooper looks for in terms of solidity to have the extra midfielder, especially when we have a side that has 4 in that box midfield in the center. So you have issues trying to keep up with certain players and figuring out who you have to mark and who you have to leave. So you have to be very disciplined. So it'll probably be a 4-3-3, but like you mentioned, with a lot of absences in the right wing slot, it's going to be a big dilemma for Cooper to be solid, but also sort of try to nick something off the break.
Well, we do know that at least According to the Leicester City socials, that Jamie Vardy is in good enough spirits to be shoveling up some snow on the training pitch. So at least maybe that doubtful consideration might not be as much of a concern unless he's too busy creating snow angels. But I think that you've highlighted a couple of things that we should definitely keep in mind as it relates to just the changes that they've made and maybe where some of the strengths would be, even though there are a lot of question marks still. It does feel as if, though, this is a side that is, very Swiss cheese, and the amount of weaknesses they have, and those holes are just very large.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are significant weaknesses. The first one that stands out for me is that, again, only three sides have conceded more than Leicester in the league this season. Individually, as a unit, like I mentioned, seem all over the place. There is a little bit of vulnerability in the decisions that they make. I think if you get 1v1 with Faz, or if you get 1v1 with Okoli or Vestergaard, there's a lot of joy to be had. If we go back to the FA Cup tie that we had last season under Maresca, Jackson destroyed Vestergaard. It was a Gareth Bale versus Maicon performance where he was just torn to shreds by Nico over the course of the first 60, 65 minutes. And I don't think he's recovered from that at all. So it's going to be very interesting for an attack that likes to play together in terms of Nico Jackson and Cole Palmer. Neto is also making a lot of good waves. So I think this is a great backline to come up against in terms of a confidence perspective. You just have to do the basics right. And I do believe you're going to have a very, very good time. I also mentioned Cooper has dropped key personnel. So it does look like they're trying to prioritize a little bit of out of possession stuff, but again, they're missing Jordan Ayew. They're missing a lot of good players that should be doing it. So I think from a solidity perspective, they will be much weaker than what you expect from the strongest side. So I think even if they try to settle down in a tight shape like they tried to do against Arsenal, it's not going to work for them. I think there are simply too many holes, too many gaps in the side for them to be able to sustain it for a long period of time. So I would say even if by some misfortune you go 1-0 down, you just have to keep your heads with yourself and not try to go gung ho. Just know that there will be good chances because it's a weakened side, and you just have to make sure that you bounce on them when you create them and not, give into chaos. So that's something that I would take off. I also think that looking at the numbers, they're lacking a lot of creativity, which again is sort of central to poor attacking returns and their threat. Wilfred Ndidi, their defensive midfielder, is the highest assists provider with four, and they're tied second from bottom for big chances created. They're also 17th in the league for chances created, and their expected assists place them 19th in the league. They're sort of overperforming them from 9.2 to 12 assists, but it does look like they're already struggling. And when you take away Buonanotte, when you take away Fatawu, when you take away all of these key attackers, then you do expect, the threat to be severely blunted. So I would say watch out for long balls. Watch out for those moments when you try to push Colville or Fofana on somebody and, Vardy has a little bit of space to run in behind. Like those moments are something you should watch out for because I think they will go more direct than usual. But yeah, from settled play in terms of transitions, I expect them to be a lot more ineffectual than they usually are. And from a tactical standpoint, it does look like they're very poor starters, Dan. They've scored only three and they've conceded nine in the first 30 minutes of games this far. And they've conceded 10 in the second half of games. So you can imagine like almost the same number in the first half an hour. So you have to go in early and you have to go for the kill. I think that generally makes a difference against Leicester. Put them under pressure and make sure they don't recover.
Well, that is an important thing to consider. We definitely are comfortable putting some teams under pressure and pressing them. I think there's a couple players that come to mind in our team that are going to make life very difficult for their side. Maybe one Moises Caicedo would be on the top of that list. But look, we're going to get our last ad break out of the way when we come back. It's question time. The table is flipped. The script is turned upside down, and it's Sam's opportunity to try to get me on record with a couple of thoughts about how Maresca might set up for this match. So stay tuned, and we'll be right back. Okay, Sam. So you have come up with a couple of questions for me to try to put together what we think might actually happen when it relates to this match. Now that we've set the stage for how this Leicester team is currently playing, what players are available, unavailable, and where maybe those areas are that they can be exploited in their different phases of the game.
Yeah, I've got a couple of like difficult questions. Welcome back from the international break. I think you'll quite enjoy them. Yeah, one thing that I sort of have observed from the games that we've been playing is teams have now caught up to something where Enzo Maresca is now pushing Malo Gusto into that right-sided 10 position. And a lot of the really good sides that he played, so Manchester United, Newcastle, Arsenal, Liverpool, all of these sides at one point or the other decided to leave Gusto alone. Like they said, he's probably not going to be threatening in that right 10 position. Do you believe that it would be wiser for Maresca to sort of stay with what we're trying to do because it's working so far, or do you think there's an alternate solution there? And maybe it's like referring to what he said in the press conference, like two tens with Joao Felix and Cole Palmer. Like, what do you think is the way forward in that regard? Because it's certainly a weakness for us. Like teams are just leaving Gusto alone, knowing if he gets the ball, in those positions, he's not going to shoot or create anything. It's just wiser to keep your defensive midfielder on Palmer and make sure he's double marked.
Ooh, that's a tough one. I don't love. I mean, like, look, we're in a scenario now. I mean, we thought we were going to have Reece James back and healthy, and so when that isn't the case, we are now moving ourselves to a position where Malo Gusto becomes the primary individual for right back consideration over other options. One's very far on the list, like Axel Disasi, that we are not looking to see, and it does feel as if Maresca has been more comfortable to let Gusto tuck in rather than Cucurella on the left hand side. So I don't know, and I don't feel like there's going to be a massive change. I mean, you can ask me what I'd like to see and what I think is going to be realistic and what we will see is I do think Maresca is comfortable with the way that things are working because he's not making wholesale changes to this team and this side. So my gut is we will see the same pattern of play, the same type of situation in place for how Gusto gets deployed and where how that kind of sits and affects the fact that now you have maybe Caicedo needing to drop a little deeper to kind of cover across the challenges that puts someone like West Fofana under for having to really own the side. I mean, really, Colwell and Fofana within how both Cucurella and Gusto give up a lot of space with the way that they're being deployed to really put our center backs in a very heavy, usually one-on-one, potentially two-on-one type of situation, which is not the most ideal situation. So I don't feel like we see a change in this match, given maybe a thought around who the competition is. I think we are going to feel like we can go out and play the game as we've been playing it. If this was the Villa game, coming up, or I think that might have been a different scenario. So you could tell me if you agree or disagree, but I feel like we're going to see the exact same blueprint rolled out for this one.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think with Touchwood, Maresca saying that it's a small injury for Reece James. I do believe maybe like a couple of games down the line, Maresca has the option to just go with the blueprint that he's been going with. And if it's working, why try to sort of fix something that isn't broke? And yeah, I mean, I have strong opinions on this. I do believe like there is a change you can make. But again, that is something that Maresca has tried, like partially, and it's also sort of given us a little bit of heartache, where he's sort of instead of putting Gusto at right 10, he's put him at double pivot next to Caicedo, which I think is a pretty brave move, to be honest. But it's also allowed a little bit of attacking flexibility in the attacking third. But inevitably, I think there might be an occasion where Madueke is either rested or sort of
Mm,
benched, and you might see something like an Nkunku on the left wing, Palmer at number 10, and Neto on the right wing. And that essentially allows you a pretty interesting configuration where it's Neto on the right, two tens with Nkunku and Cole Palmer, and then Kukureya sort of pushing up on the left hand side with Gusto sort of slotting you know, into either midfield or centre back, some kind of configuration there. But I think that's the way to go. If you really have two guys who are scoring, like free scoring in the Conference League, and you're in a position where you're not shooting enough, you're not creating enough threat, like your underlying numbers suggest that you will have a drop off in attack. Maybe that's something at the back of Maresca's mind or his analyst's mind saying that, it's inevitably going to happen. So how do we raise that number? How do we get more shots in? How do we get a more creative presence in? Because Gusto is sort of burning up a slot in attack. So
yeah.
I think that's a conversation to be had against, like you said, sides like Leicester, where maybe the marking is not going to be as severe. Maybe it's there are going to be holes in certain positions, and maybe Palmer, Jackson, Madueke, Neto, those four are enough to sort of blow them away. But what if we have a fifth attacker, and instead of Gusto being in that advanced position, he's slightly deeper with Caicedo? Then you're also eliminating the need to have physicality and speed in midfield, where both of those guys are very good athletes and offer cover. So I think that's something Maresca might try, with five attackers up front and Kunku and Felix finally getting to play Premier League football.
Wild. That would be very interesting for a couple of players who have not really featured in our Premier League performances up until this point in time. I think you have another question about the midfield configuration and more about the who is the Moises Caicedo partner.
Ooh, oh my God, yeah, that's an interesting one, right? I mean, I think Maresca sort of hinted at saying that Casares played for under 21, Vega played minutes for Portugal. So it is quite hard because your backup options are also fortunately getting minutes outside of the club, which is exactly what you want. You still want them to develop. But yeah, quite an interesting perspective. But we've just had an Andre Santos special with our Brazilian favorites, Nath and Jess. So I do believe it's just trying to make room for that, inevitably, maybe just get through the motions and whatever you have at your disposal, like make sure you are sort of using it, but also sort of keeping one eye on Santos and saying when he comes, he's definitely going to be somebody who offers what you're missing in midfield. That's something that I'm super excited for. And I think he's going to be, an exceptional player. I really had earmarked him as generational when I saw him at 16 at Vasco. So yeah, personal stake in this, and I'm super excited. But I think he's the Caicedo partner plus the Caicedo replacement. Like not replacement, like sort of Caicedo backup per se. If you can rotate him with Enzo or Lavia, and then you have three very strong midfielders sort of competing for those two slots.
Yeah, it's in, and I think you kind of also had the note in here about would we see Lavia or Enzo in this particular match, and it does feel with Lavia showing up in the training videos and photos that even though he was not with the Belgian team over the break, that there is a very high likelihood that he can start playing, contribute within this match. We have seen that Moises Caicedo apparently is impervious to potentially playing multiple matches and international travel at times. That Enzo is not the same way. So even though Caicedo did have two full 90s during this international break, Enzo having 190 and one 76-minute appearance against Peru and Paraguay, respectively. I feel like it is primed for a Lavia start over an Enzo start. I do feel like there's an opportunity for Enzo Fernandez to come off the bench to play, but I don't think it's at the expense of he's not going to start necessarily ahead of Lavia. It feels as if there's a pretty specific view that Maresca has, and there's also the consideration about the Conference League match, in the midweek that Chelsea would be looking forward to as well. So I don't think there's a change there. I don't see that happening in this scenario.
Well, I agree with you, but I do believe there should be a change. I think like
Ooh.
yeah, I think both of them. I've mentioned this in the pod when we've spoken, on the review pods as well. I think Enzo has been sort of unfairly maligned because whenever Enzo plays next to Caicedo, he's inevitably the number 10 because he's trying to push Palmer onto the right hand side and give him his favorite side. But when it's Lavia playing, it's always Lavia deeper with Caicedo. So why are we judging two players differently for two different responsibilities? And I promise you, if Lavia was asked to do box to box runs, if he was asked to do shunting and essentially get to the box for headers, he would look as poor as Enzo has. And that's where my issue with Maresca's use of the left-sided pivot happens, where you look at Benfica games and how Roger Schmidt used him. You look at Argentina, who are using him as the number 6, as the deepest midfielder, and he's looking so good. Like he's essentially picking out passes from deeper. He's giving you the switch option. He's giving you the deep through ball option. He's as good, he's as good as dropping his shoulders and evading the press. Lavia is probably like superior in that regard in terms of like how he orchestrates build up. But everything from that point on to the other side of the box, Enzo is, in my opinion, better. And I've seen Lavia also make mistakes in terms of trying to get close to, pressing the other pivot and then getting spun. Gravenberg did it to him a couple of times. There was this chance against Man United where he went for a header, completely missed it, and sorry, against Liverpool, where he went for a header, completely missed it, and Curtis Jones was able to create an opportunity that resulted in a Gakpo goal, which was fortunately ruled out for offside. So there have been some glaring errors from him as well in that screening position. And I think if you put Enzo there, you probably get more or less the same, but maybe a slightly higher upside up front. It's just trying to figure out the balance. And I would love to ask Maresca this if I did have the opportunity to. I'm saying, why do you talk about physicality with Lavia when he's equally slow? When there's also a lack of athleticism out of possession. For me, Enzo and Lavia are the same out of possession, same weaknesses, same issues. And it's quite unfair to use one player, like the same player one way and the same player another way and say one is better than the other. So why not try Enzo there and figure out how it goes? But I would love to see Enzo in that deeper position and see how it goes.
Well, things to keep in mind. I'm sure people will let us know in the comments on YouTube, in Discord, and across social media if they agree or disagree on the Enzo take that we have. It feels like he is one of the most polarizing players in the side at the moment. But when it comes down to predictions for this one, Sam, do you have any predictions on maybe players of note or scoreline that you would have there? I mean, I think I'm predicting a Chelsea win. It will be post birthday. So I would hope that a little bit of my birthday good luck would transfer over to this Chelsea team and that they can take 3 points to further their aspirations and their desires of a top 4 finish and hopefully separating themselves a little bit from the pack behind them. And I also feel like I'm ready for a Cole Palmer goal here. I'm ready for Cole Palmer to be absolutely on fire again. And it feels like a good opportunity for him to do it.
I would heavily incline sort of like in that particular chain of thought, but I'm also sort of looking at, the central positions and I'm thinking Nico Jackson has a very good shot.
Ooh.
And yeah, I expect both of them, one of them at least, like 100% to get on the scoreline. I'm also emboldened by my predictions on the board coming good this time around. So I'm probably going to be like buoyed by that optimism. I'm going to go for like a 4-1 scoreline here. Um, Probably like 3 out of the 4 guys up front get goals. So I'm going for a big win for us. What about you, Dan?
Wow.
Like feeling the same birthday vibes, or are we sort of going a little more pragmatic?
No, I think something 2-1, 3-1. I don't trust our team. I don't trust our keeper to protect us from giving up a goal at this point. That I have zero confidence in our ability to do it. I mean, we last had a clean sheet, I think, in in the league in the fifth match of the season when we beat West Ham. So it's been quite a bit of time since we have been able to keep that clean sheet, to keep the back line fully protected. And so, yeah, I do think it is a 2-1, 3-1 type of scenario. I love the shout for Nico Jackson. It feels like there's an opportunity there. And I would imagine we see Neto as well. I mean, I feel like he could come at least with an assist, if not a goal as well. And I mean, though, if three people individual scored and they're all different, those are the three that I would probably pick as the goal scorers in this match.
I absolutely agree with the clean sheet split, which is why I went 4-1 and not 4-0. But yeah, I think that's going to be the big talking point in the January transfer window in terms of, are we going to upgrade in that position? And the Athletic did a whole piece in terms of Sanchez has lost the Chelsea fans, but the backing remains. So it'll be quite intriguing from that standpoint. But I do think there's enough in attack, and we've also seen, Palmer, Nico go through that run of brutal fixtures where they've just been starved of a little bit of like freedom, where they've had to do a lot more defensive work and focus on the team first. I think this is one where they're finally sort of allowed to do their own thing and breathe a little bit. So that's why I'm sort of going for a big win. It's a tough run. Arsenal, Manchester United, Newcastle twice, Liverpool in that run, and I think they've had like one goal assist combined in those three games. They scored in the Newcastle game, but other than that, it was just like very, very frugal and miserly. But I do expect them to take full advantage. I know it's away, but I expect Leicester to sort of come out and sort of that pressure of sitting back and letting things happen, trying to go for the kill. But I do expect us to put up a good showing. So I'm quite optimistic then.
Well, hopefully that is the case. We'd love to see it. We'd love to see Chelsea absolutely pummel aside and put themselves in a top position as we continue to head through what is going to be a very difficult run, just in terms of the amount of fixtures, not necessarily in terms of the type of competition we're playing. Again, one of the most challenging was the time period we went through most recently. But look, that is it for this episode. So we are previewed done with Leicester, but we've got more content coming your way. There'll be a match review. There'll be our Thanksgiving mailbag special, our annual tradition next week as well. And then we'll also have some other content, more previews and stuff coming your way. But let's go do it for this one. So until next time, Chelsea fans, thank you, Sam, and keep the blue flag flying high.